The town of Willow Ridge didn't know how to hurry. It woke slowly each morning, as if the sunrise needed permission to paint the sky. Mist drifted lazily above the river, curling around the old stone bridge that had carried far more stories than cars. Wooden shutters creaked open one by one, shopkeepers swept their doorsteps, and the smell of fresh bread floated gently down the narrow street. It was the kind of place the world forgot, and the kind of place that healed what the world broke. On a quiet autumn morning, one touched with the softness of gray clouds and the promise of rain, the peace was interrupted by something Willow Ridge rarely saw. A black luxury car, polished like midnight, rolled slowly into town. Children playing near the bakery paused. Dogs lifted their heads. Old men sitting on the bench near the fountain exchanged glances. The car didn't fit. Neither did the man stepping out of it. His name was Adrian Hale, a billionaire, a man whose entire life existed behind glass boardroom walls and tinted skyscraper windows. The world called him a genius, a visionary, an empire builder. But the truth was simpler. He was a man who had everything except a place where his heart felt at home. Adrian closed the car door with a soft thud and looked around, at the crooked lampposts, the colorful chalkboard signs, the tiny grocery store with vegetables stacked in wooden crates. A slow exhale escaped him, one he didn't realize he had been holding. In his hand, a leather folder. Inside it, plans for a luxury resort that would sit beside the Willow Ridge River. On land the town believed belonged to history, memory, and peace. There was only one obstacle. The last piece of land he needed wasn't for sale. He walked slowly along the cobblestones, shoes far too expensive for the ground beneath them. A cool wind brushed past, carrying with it the distant chime of a shop bell and the soft laughter of someone he couldn't yet see. Then he noticed it, a warm, yellow storefront tucked between a florist and an antique shop. A hand-painted sign read, "The River Room. Books, coffee, hope." Hope. It was a word he hadn't tasted in years, but something about it, about the quiet glow from inside, the silhouettes moving softly among bookshelves, pulled him closer. He pushed open the door. Warmth wrapped around him immediately. The smell of old pages, of roasted coffee beans, of rain-damp coats, and something faintly sweet, like vanilla. Soft acoustic music hummed in the air. And then he saw her, Elena. She stood behind the counter, tying her apron again after helping an elderly man carry his books to a table. Her hair was swept into a loose bun, a few strands escaping to frame her face. She wasn't flawless in the way expensive life usually defined beauty. She was something gentler, something that made the room feel calmer just by existing. When her eyes lifted and met his, Adrian felt something he hadn't felt in a very long time. Stillness. "Good morning," she said, her voice gentle. "First time in Willow Ridge?" He blinked once, caught off guard by the softness of her tone. "Is it that obvious?" Elena smiled, small, warm, true. "The town has a way of recognizing new footsteps." He almost smiled back. Almost. He moved to the counter, keeping his expression neutral, steady. He didn't know why he was suddenly nervous. Billionaires didn't get nervous. Billionaires didn't stumble over introductions in tiny coffee shops. And yet, somehow, with her, the part of him that spent years calculating risks and profits felt suddenly out of place. "What can I get for you?" she asked. He hesitated, only for a moment. "What do you recommend?" She studied him. Not his suit, not his watch, not the polished exterior, but him. As if she were trying to see the man underneath the armor success had built around him. "You look like someone who needs something warm," she said softly. "And a little hope." She turned to make the coffee, her movements careful and quiet. Adrian found himself watching the way she poured the milk, the way she tapped the spoon twice against the cup, the way she hummed under her breath. When she handed him the mug, there was a tiny heart drawn in the foam. He realized then that she gave every customer a small piece of her kindness, freely, instinctively. a kindness money couldn't buy. He took a sip. Warmth spread across his tongue, down his throat, settling somewhere deep inside him, where cold had lived for too long. "It's good," he said simply. Elena's eyes softened. "I'm glad." He placed the cup down slowly. "My name is Adrian. Welcome to Willow Ridge, Adrian." She offered her hand, warm, steady, real. "I'm Elena." He shook her hand. Just a handshake. Just a moment. But sometimes, destiny begins softly, with nothing more than a quiet room, a warm cup, and a smile that feels like home. Outside, the clouds thickened with rain. Inside, something else was forming. Something far more dangerous and far more beautiful than Adrian had planned for. He didn't know it yet, but Willow Ridge was about to change him, and Elena would be the reason why. The rain came down in silver sheets by the time Adrian stepped back outside with his coffee. The wind carried the scent of wet earth and river moss, and every raindrop seemed to whisper something Willow Ridge had been saying for years: slow down. But slowing down had never been part of Adrian's life. Success demanded speed. Money demanded precision. And power demanded distance. Distance from people, from emotions, from anything that could pull him off balance. Still, as he leaned under the awning of the river room, watching the rain blur the edges of the world, he felt something shift inside him, quietly, like a small stone rolling down a mountain. He didn't notice Elena through the window until she appeared again behind the counter, moving between tables with a gentle smile, refilling cups, greeting every person by name. She belongs here, he thought. And then he caught himself. He wasn't here for her. He wasn't here for the town. He was here for business. He forced his gaze away from the window and opened the leather folder beneath the awning. Inside lay the resort blueprints, a masterpiece of modern architecture, sleek glass villas, a private spa, a panoramic restaurant overlooking the river. It would bring tourism, money, jobs. That's what everyone would say. But there was only one problem. The last piece of the riverbank belonged to someone who refused to sell. His assistant had mentioned the landowner was a woman in her 30s, living in Willow Ridge, running a small local business. He hadn't expected her to run this business. He inhaled sharply, shutting the folder. A coincidence, maybe. Or fate, if fate had a cruel sense of humor. He stepped back inside. Elena looked up from the counter, brushing a strand of damp hair behind her ear. "Back so soon?" she smiled. "The rain won't let you escape, I'm afraid." Adrian shook the water from his coat. "I realized I may need a place to work for a while." "Then you're welcome to stay." She nodded toward a small corner near the window. "That table is usually the quietest. The river loves to keep it company." He moved toward it, feeling oddly grateful. As he settled in, he noticed something about the table. It wasn't perfect. One leg was slightly shorter, creating a tiny wobble. Yet someone had folded a piece of paper under the leg to steady it. Not professionally, lovingly. It was the kind of detail he admired, silently. Elena brought him a pot of hot water and a refill of coffee. "On the house," she said simply. "You don't have to do that." "I know," she said with a soft shrug. "But kindness doesn't reduce our profit margin. It usually increases it in the long run." He stared at her for a moment, taken off guard by her gentle boldness. Most people softened their words around him. Most people tried to impress him. She didn't. She walked away without waiting for his reaction. He opened his documents again, but as rain tapped steadily on the glass, he found himself watching her, not in a romantic way yet, but in a curious one, wondering how someone could pour so much warmth into something as simple as a coffee shop. Wondering why the world outside Willow Ridge didn't work this way. A stranger becoming familiar. Hours passed quietly. Customers came and went. An elderly couple holding hands, a young artist sketching the rain, two teenagers sharing a slice of warm apple pie. Every person who entered melted a little, spoke a little softer, stayed a little longer. It wasn't the coffee. It wasn't the books, it was the space. Or maybe it was her. Near noon, Elena approached his table with a gentle smile. "You've been working for 3 hours," she said. "Most people forget how to breathe when they do that." He raised an eyebrow. "And I don't?" "You don't blink," she countered. He let out a small breath, amused by her observation. "I'm used to it." "That doesn't make it good," she said softly. Her words weren't intrusive. They felt like a warm hand placed on a cold shoulder. She glanced at the document spread across his table. "Looks important." "It is," he admitted. "Big projects?" she asked. He hesitated. "Something like that." For a moment, she didn't press. She simply nodded, as if to say, "You're allowed to keep your walls for now." "Well," she said, tucking the order pad into her apron, "if you need a break, try looking at the river instead of the numbers. It solves problems numbers can't." And she walked away again before he could reply. Adrian looked out the window. The river moved slowly, patient with itself. He envied it. A name whispers through town. By late afternoon, the rain softened into a mist. Adrian finally closed the folder, exhausted. When he stood to stretch, Elena was wiping the counter, humming something soft. He approached, unsure why his steps felt heavier than usual. "Elena," he began, "I was curious. Who owns that riverfront property past the stone bridge?" Her hands froze. The cloth slipped slightly in her fingers. For the first time all day, her smile didn't reach her eyes. "I do," she said quietly. Silence fell between them, thin, fragile. Adrian felt the air shift. "You?" he repeated. "Yes." She set the cloth down carefully. "It was my mother's. She left it to me." He inhaled slowly. "I see." Her jaw tightened. "You're the businessman, aren't you?" she said softly. "The one trying to buy it." His heartbeat stumbled, not from fear, but from something heavier. "I am." She nodded once, not angrily, but painfully, as if something inside her had known it all along. "I guess kindness makes people honest," she murmured, "even when honesty hurts." He opened his mouth to explain, to soften the truth, but she raised a hand gently. "It's all right, Adrian. You're doing your job." She stepped back, putting distance between them. Not physically, emotionally. "But that land," her voice wavered. "It holds memories money can't measure." He didn't speak. He couldn't. Outside, the rain began again. Inside, something between them broke before it even had the chance to bloom. The weight of what he doesn't know. That evening, as the sky dimmed into a twilight blue, the shop prepared to close. Adrian lingered near the door, knowing he should leave, yet unable to step out. "Elena," he said finally. She looked up, tired but composed. "I didn't come here to hurt you." "I know," she said, though her voice trembled. "But sometimes intentions don't matter. Impact does." He lowered his gaze, something unfamiliar tightening in his chest. "Can we talk?" he asked gently. She hesitated. Then she motioned to a table. "5 minutes. After that, I have to lock up." They sat across from each other, the space between them filled with the scent of coffee grounds and rain. He spoke first. "My company wants to build a resort," he said quietly. "Something that could bring jobs, tourism, revenue." She closed her eyes for a moment, pained. "I know," she whispered. "The town council mentioned it months ago." He swallowed. "Your land is the only missing piece." Her gaze lifted, meeting his with quiet strength. "That land," she said softly, "is the last place I stood with my mother." The breath caught in his throat. "It's where she taught me how to read, where she told me stories about the river, where she held my hand when life was too heavy." Her fingers brushed across the table, as if touching memories. "You can't put a price on that, Adrian." He felt the weight of her words sink deep into him. Not because he was losing a negotiation, but because he was losing her trust. "I didn't know," he whispered. "Most people don't care to," she replied gently. He flinched, not at her tone, but at the truth inside it. Before he could respond, she stood. "I should close now." He rose slowly. "Elena? Good night, Adrian." She walked past him and turned off the lights, and he stepped out into the rain, feeling strangely empty. A night he can't shake. Adrian didn't drive back to the city. He couldn't. Instead, he checked into a small local inn overlooking the river. The room was modest, wooden furniture, a handmade quilt, a single lamp that flickered slightly when switched on. He sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the rain-streaked window. He had closed billion-dollar deals with colder hearts, negotiated with people far tougher than a gentle bookstore owner. But none of them made him feel like this. Guilty, conflicted, exposed. He pressed his palms to his eyes. He had told himself he came to Willow Ridge to secure land. But deep down, another truth was emerging. He didn't want to destroy anything that belonged to her. He didn't want to be the villain in her story. And he didn't know what scared him more, the fact that he cared, or the reason why he cared. The days that follow. Over the next several days, Adrian remained in Willow Ridge. Officially, he was negotiating. Unofficially, he was staying close. He visited the river room every morning, always at the same table, always with the same documents he barely read. At first, Elena kept her distance. Her politeness returned, gentle, professional, but the warmth had faded. Her smiles were shorter, her gaze avoided his. Her voice carried a thin layer of hurt she tried to hide. Yet she still refilled his coffee without him asking. She still asked if he'd eaten lunch. She still placed a small napkin beside his cup, folded neatly. Kindness without invitation, kindness without return. And every time she did it, something inside him cracked deeper. The town begins to see him differently. It wasn't long before Willow Ridge noticed him. People whispered, "That's the man trying to buy Elena's land. He's some billionaire," they say. "He looks lonely. He looks lost." Old Mrs. Carter approached him one morning while he sat at his usual table. "Money can buy you a lot of things," she said, her hands trembling slightly as she stirred her tea. "But kindness, that's something you have to give from your own pocket." He swallowed hard. "I'm trying." "No, dear." She patted his hand gently. "You're thinking. Trying comes next." He didn't know why her words hit so deeply, but they did. A moment they didn't expect. On the 5th day, while the afternoon sun broke through the clouds, Elena stood at his table with something unexpected. 2 mugs of hot chocolate topped with cinnamon. "What's this?" He blinked. "A peace offering," she murmured. He froze, stunned. She sat across from him, resting her hands around her mug. "I realized I was treating you like a villain, and maybe that wasn't fair." "You weren't wrong," he whispered. She shook her head softly. "You're just someone trying to do his job, and someone who maybe forgot what home feels like." His chest tightened. "How do you know I forgot?" he asked. "Because your eyes look like mine did after my mother died," she said quietly, "searching for a place they can rest." He almost broke. "Elena," she looked out the window. "I don't want to hate you, Adrian. And I don't want to hurt you," he said, voice cracking. Their eyes met. Something shifted again. Not a beginning, not yet, but the first fragile thread of understanding, where rising action ends and destiny begins. Days turned into rituals. He walked her home sometimes, never touching, always careful. She brewed him coffee, never sweet enough, always warm. He helped her restock shelves, quietly, gently, as if the books were pieces of her heart. He didn't push the land issue. He didn't bring it up at all. For the first time in his life, a project didn't consume him. A person did. He began noticing things. How she tucked her hair when she was nervous. How she pressed her thumb against her mug when lost in thought. How she locked the shop door each night, whispering, "Thank you for today," under her breath, as if the room were alive. She began noticing him too. How he hid his tired eyes behind confidence. How he breathed a little easier near the river. How he always paused before saying goodbye, like he wasn't ready to leave yet. What neither of them noticed, or maybe both feared to admit, was the subtle, impossible truth. 2 very different worlds were falling into step. Slowly, gently, dangerously. because kindness had created a bridge between them. And soon, something far stronger would try to tear it apart. The river had turned darker that evening, reflecting a sky heavy with unsettled clouds. Willow Ridge was preparing for its first winter storm of the year. Shopkeepers brought in their signs, families closed windows, and the old street lamps flickered uncertainly in the rising wind. Adrian stood outside the river room, watching flakes of frost collect on the empty tables near the window. The cafe was closed for the night, but lights still glowed softly inside. Elena was cleaning up alone. He hesitated before knocking. For days he had felt something building between them, something fragile yet undeniable, something he feared but could no longer outrun. He pushed the door gently. Elena looked up, surprised, a cloth still in her hand. A few strands of her hair had fallen loose, brushing her cheek. The sight of her in that warm yellow light felt like safety he wasn't sure he deserved. "You're still here?" she asked softly. "I wanted to talk." She nodded and went back to wiping the counter, though her hands trembled ever so slightly. "I figured," she murmured. He stepped closer. "Elena," but before he could form his next words, the door swung open again. A rush of cold air swept in, and with it, a tall man with a clipboard, a branded jacket, and a badge bearing Adrian's corporate logo. "Mr. Hale," he said briskly, "sorry for the delay. The environmental clearance documents are ready. We just need the landowner's signature. We can finalize the acquisition tonight." Elena froze. The cloth dropped from her hand. She turned slowly, eyes widening, heart cracking in real time. Adrian felt the world collapse. He stepped toward her. "Elena, wait!" But she backed away. Her voice was barely a whisper, but it sliced him open. "You lied to me." "No," he breathed. "I wasn't." The man with the clipboard stepped forward again, oblivious, eager. "We're keeping the original resort plan, sir. Demolition begins at the riverbank next month." "Stop talking," Adrian snapped. But the damage was already done. Elena's palm covered her mouth as she stumbled back toward a table, bracing herself. "Demolition?" she whispered. "My mother's land? My memories? Everything she left me?" Tears welled in her eyes, shining like broken glass. "I was trying to find another approach," Adrian said desperately. "I never intended." "Then why didn't you tell me the truth?" she demanded, her voice rising with heartbreak. "Why did you keep coming here? Why did you pretend this was something else?" He stepped toward her, agony twisting his features. "Because it became something else, Elena." She shook her head. "No, you don't get to say that now." The clipboard man glanced between them, confused. "Should I wait outside?" "Get out," Adrian growled. When the door closed behind the man, silence fell again. A deep, aching silence, like the sound right before a heart breaks cleanly in two. Elena wrapped her arms around herself, as if holding together the pieces of something precious. "You used me," she whispered, trembling. "Every smile, every walk home, every conversation. Was that just to soften me? To make me sell?" He felt the accusation burn through him. "No," he said urgently. "Elena, listen to me. I never intended to hurt you. I came here for business, but then I met you, and everything changed. I swear to you, what I feel—" "Feel?" she choked. "Do you even know what that means?" "You think I don't?" he whispered. "You think money made me heartless? I've been alone my entire life. And when I met you, I—" "Stop," she pleaded, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Please, just stop." He reached out instinctively, but she stepped back again, as if his touch might turn her memories to ash. "You can't take something away from someone," she said quietly, "and then tell them you love them." The word hit him like a blow. "I didn't say that," he whispered. "You didn't need to," she replied. "Your actions said enough." Adrian's throat tightened painfully. "Elena, don't do this. Don't shut me out." But she only stared at him with a devastation he had no defense against. "I trusted you, Adrian," she whispered, "and you took advantage of that kindness." He felt the words break inside him, one by one. "Elena, Please, just give me a chance to explain." She wiped her tears, her voice trembling. "You had your chance, and you chose silence." She stepped past him toward the door, opening it to the icy wind. "Goodbye, Adrian." He stood frozen. "Don't," he whispered. "Don't walk away." But she stepped out anyway, the snowfall swallowing her figure. The door shut softly behind her, and the sound was louder than thunder. A man brought to his knees outside. The storm broke loose. Snow and sleet whipped through the streets, fierce and frigid. Adrian stumbled out of the cafe, searching for her through sheets of white. "Elena!" His voice was swallowed by the wind. He ran toward the bridge, toward the riverbank, toward the place she cherished most. He knew she would go there. Pain draws people to their memories. When he reached the river path, he saw her, standing alone in the falling snow, staring at the land her mother had left her. The willow trees bent in the storm, branches shaking like grieving hands. "Elena," he whispered, breathless, approaching slowly. She didn't turn. "You shouldn't be out here. You shouldn't be here," she replied softly. He exhaled shakily, the cold burning his lungs. The storm roared around them, but the quiet between them hurt more. "Elena, I'm canceling the project." Her shoulders tensed. "I'm ending everything," he said again, louder this time. "The resort, the expansion, all of it." She closed her eyes, tears mixing with snowflakes. "Why?" she whispered. "Because you feel guilty?" "No," he said, stepping closer. "Because I feel something far more dangerous." She swallowed hard, fighting the ache in her chest. "And what is that?" she whispered. His voice trembled. "Love." She turned, slowly, painfully. Her eyes reflected a storm even wilder than the one around them. "You don't get to love me, Adrian," she said, voice cracking. "Not when you were ready to destroy the last thing I have." "I wasn't thinking," he confessed. "I was the man I've always been. Cold, calculated, empty. But with you, I'm trying. God, I'm trying to be different." She shook her head as tears streamed down. "You should have told me the truth." "I was afraid," he whispered. "Of losing the land?" she asked bitterly. "No." He stepped closer. "Of losing you." Her breath caught. He continued, voice raw. "Elena, you showed me a world where kindness matters, where people matter. You made me feel seen. But I broke something in you, and I don't know how to fix it." She looked away, hugging herself. "Some things can't be fixed." He reached out and gently touched her hand, just barely. "Then let me at least try." She jerked her hand away, crying harder. "Stop," she whispered. "Please stop trying. It hurts." He felt his heart collapse inside him. "Elena." She looked up at him, tears shining. "I cared about you," she confessed softly. "More than I should have. And maybe a part of me wanted to believe you cared too. But love, real love, doesn't hide the truth." The snowfall thickened around them, swirling like torn pages of a story that had been rewritten too many times. "Elena," he whispered, voice breaking. "I'm sorry." She inhaled shakily. "I know," she said. "But sometimes sorry isn't enough." And with that, she turned and walked away, her figure fading into the storm. Adrian stood alone by the river, tears lost in the freezing wind. For the first time in his life, money meant nothing. Power meant nothing. Success meant nothing, because none of it could bring her back to him. The night that changed everything. Hours passed before Adrian returned to the inn. He was soaked, shivering, exhausted every way a person can be. He sat on the edge of the bed, staring at his hands, hands that had signed deals worth billions, but had failed to hold on to the one thing he wanted most: love. He opened his laptop with trembling fingers. A message from corporate blinked on the screen. "Project will move forward. Finalize land purchase ASAP." He stared at the message for a long time. Then he closed the laptop, stood up, and threw it into the trash. He grabbed his phone, called his assistant, and with a voice shaking but certain, he said, "Shut down the entire Willow Ridge project, permanently." His assistant stuttered. "But sir, the board, the investors." "I'll deal with them," Adrian said firmly. "And the losses. I don't care." "But why?" his assistant asked, stunned. Adrian closed his eyes. "Because kindness spoke louder than money," he whispered, "and I finally listened." He hung up. Outside, the storm raged on. Inside, something inside him finally broke open. Painfully, beautifully, irreversibly. He sank to the floor, his back against the bed, snow melting from his hair, tears burning hot. He wasn't crying for the land. He wasn't crying for the project. He was crying for her, for the woman who taught him more in a few weeks than all the years of his life combined, for the love he had discovered too late, for the truth he had hidden too long, and for the kindness he had betrayed. This was the night Adrian Hale learned what it meant to lose something priceless. This was the night the billionaire finally understood love. But fate was not finished with them yet. Because sometimes the hardest heartbreak paves the way for the most powerful redemption. And dawn, no matter how cold the night, always finds a way to return. The storm passed some time before dawn. Willow Ridge woke slowly, its rooftops dusted with fragile white. The river steamed faintly in the cold morning air, as if exhaling after a night spent holding too many secrets. Snow-laden branches bent gently, releasing tiny clumps of white into the stillness. It was the kind of morning where the world seemed quiet enough to hear regret breathing. Adrian hadn't slept. He sat in the small inn-room, wrapped in the heavy quilt, eyes burning from hours of replaying the same moment. The look on Elena's face when she realized he had lied by omission. Every heartbeat felt like punishment, every breath like confession. He had broken deals before, hundreds of them. He had lost money, lost partnerships, lost trust. But nothing had ever felt like this. Nothing had ever hollowed him out so completely. He stepped outside into the cold, his footsteps muffled by fresh snow. The town was barely awake, chimneys smoking softly, curtains opening to faint light. The bakery cat pawed at the frost on the window before slipping inside. Adrian walked toward the river, his breath clouded in the air, but his thoughts were trapped in a storm far colder than any winter wind. He reached the familiar bend in the riverbank, the place where Elena's mother had once read her stories, where Elena had confessed her memories under the willow trees. Snow blanketed the ground, quiet and untouched. He stood there a long time, long enough to feel the weight of everything he'd nearly destroyed. The town speaks before she does. By the time he returned to the main street, the town was awake. People greeted him more cautiously than before. Gentle nods, sympathetic but distant. Old Mrs. Carter was sweeping snow from the bakery steps. When she saw him, she paused, leaning on her broom. "You look like a man carrying too many winters on his shoulders," she said softly. He forced a weak smile. "Maybe I deserve them." She studied him the way only someone who had lived long enough to understand human weakness could. "Elena is hurting," she said. "But hurt means the heart was open in the first place." He clenched his jaw. "I never meant." "Intentions," she interrupted gently, "are whispers. Actions are thunder." His chest tightened. "Go slow," she added, brushing snow from her coat. "Kindness needs time to grow back where it was broken." He nodded, though the truth pressed hard against him. He wasn't sure Elena wanted anything to grow back at all. Inside the river room opened later that day. The "open" sign hung crookedly, as if it had been placed without much care. The lights were dimmer. There were fewer pastries at the counter. The air felt different, heavier, quieter. Adrian stood outside the door for several minutes before gathering the courage to enter. Elena was behind the counter, pouring hot water into a teapot. Her hands were steady. But her eyes told another story, red from crying, tired from the night before. She didn't look up, not at first. When she did, The space between them filled with an emotion he couldn't name. Something fragile, something wounded, something almost too delicate to touch. "Hi," he whispered. "Hi," she replied quietly. He stepped forward, removing his gloves slowly, as if each movement required permission. "I shut down the project," he said gently. Her shoulders stiffened. "I heard," she replied, her voice thin. "The town council mentioned it this morning." He swallowed. "Good." Silence. He waited for a reaction. Anger, relief, anything. But she simply set the teapot down and wiped the counter. "Why are you here, Adrian?" she asked, her voice tired instead of harsh. "To apologize," he said, properly, honestly. She closed her eyes for a moment, steadying herself. "You already apologized last night." That wasn't enough. "Maybe nothing will be," she whispered. The words cut deeper than anger ever could have. He stepped closer, but not too close, leaving enough space between them to breathe. "Elena, you changed me," he said quietly. "Not with your anger, not with your opinions, with your kindness. With the way you make the world feel softer just by being in it." Her eyes glistened. "Please don't say things like that right now," she whispered. "But it's the truth," he insisted. "You taught me what matters. You made me see the world beyond numbers and profit and progress. And I—" "You hid the truth," she interrupted, her voice trembling but calm. "And it hurt." "I know. You broke something," she said softly. He lowered his gaze. "I know." She brushed her fingers against the mug on the counter, tracing invisible lines, her way of grounding herself. "The land is safe now," she said. "That's enough." "No," he whispered. "It isn't." He looked up, eyes heavy with truth. "I don't want to leave things like this between us." She exhaled shakily. "And what do you want, Adrian?" He hesitated. Not out of fear, but because his next words felt like stepping onto ice that could crack beneath both of them. "I want a chance," he said. "A chance to show you that what I feel is real. A chance to earn back your trust, not to buy it. Not to negotiate for it, but to deserve it." Her lips parted slightly, a breath caught in her throat. But she didn't step closer. She didn't step away either. "Trust takes time," she whispered. "I have time," he replied. "All of it." She looked down again, wiping a small circle on the counter, even though it was already clean. "I don't know if I can forgive you," she admitted. He nodded, accepting the pain. "Then let me stay long enough to find out." Her hands trembled around the cloth. "Elena," he whispered, "I'm not asking for your love. Not today. Maybe not ever. I'm only asking for a chance to heal what I broke, even if that healing doesn't lead back to me." Her breath shuddered. He stepped back, giving her air, giving her choice. "I'll come to the cafe," he said softly. "I'll help if you need it. I'll stay away if you want space. Just tell me what you need." For a long moment, she didn't speak. The cafe felt silent enough to hear both their heartbeats. Finally, Elena whispered, "I need time." His chest tightened, not with despair, but with something surprisingly gentle. "Then time is yours," he said. He didn't reach for her. He didn't plead. He didn't expect. He simply stepped back toward the door. Before leaving, he looked at her one last time. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't crying. But her eyes, they weren't closing him out. Not completely. "Good night, Elena," he whispered. "Good night, Adrian," she replied softly. He left the cafe quietly, the bell chiming one last time. Outside, the storm had passed. Snow glistened under a pale sun. The river ran softly again, no longer angry, no longer wild. Redemption hadn't come yet, but something else had. A beginning, a small one, a hopeful one. And sometimes in the quiet places of the heart, hope is enough to keep love alive. Winter loosened its grip slowly in Willow Ridge. Snow melted from rooftops in quiet drips. The river thawed into silver ribbons again, flowing freely beneath the old stone bridge. Shops opened earlier, People lingered longer, and the town's heartbeat returned to its slow, steady rhythm. Time passed, not in grand moments, but in small breaths the world often overlooks. And during those weeks, Adrian Hale kept his promise. He didn't chase Elena. He didn't apologize over and over. He didn't push. He simply stayed. Every morning, he came to the river room. Sometimes he sat by the window, reading a book he bought from her shelves. Other times, he helped stack boxes, wipe tables, or carry firewood inside. Sometimes they spoke only a few sentences. Sometimes they didn't speak at all. But the silence between them changed, from sharp to soft, from wounded to warm. Healing isn't sudden. It isn't loud. It is the slow knitting of trust back into broken places. Willow Ridge watched this transition with quiet curiosity. Mrs. Carter would nod approvingly whenever she saw Adrian carrying new books inside. The bakery cat began sitting beside him at his usual table. Even the river, restless all winter, seemed calmer near him. And Elena, she was still cautious, still guarded, still tender. But her smiles began returning. Her laugh, light and musical, came back in small sparks. Her eyes, once full of hurt, slowly regained their glow. She wasn't forgiving him, not yet. But she was remembering why she cared in the first place. A day that didn't ask for much, but gave everything. One cool morning, the clouds drifted apart, revealing a sky brushed with pale gold. The river room was quiet. Only 3 customers sat inside, reading and sipping tea. Elena was behind the counter, arranging new jars of cinnamon sticks. Adrian entered quietly, brushing cold air from his coat. He nodded at her. She nodded back. But something felt different today, lighter, like the world had exhaled. "Morning," he said gently. "Morning," she replied, her voice warmer than it had been in weeks. He took his usual seat, unfolding a worn paperback. But his eyes weren't on the pages. They were watching her fingers move delicately over the jars, her hair catching the sunlight, her soft concentration making the entire room feel steadier. After a moment, she walked over to him. "You're early," she said, setting a fresh cup of coffee in front of him. He smiled. "You're busy. Thought I'd help before the rush." She looked down, tracing the rim of the mug with her thumb. "Thank you," she whispered. Something fluttered gently in his chest, not hope, not relief, but something deeper, something like peace. "Elena," he murmured, "can we walk by the river today? If you want, I mean." She hesitated. A long, quiet moment. Then she nodded. "Yes, I'd like that," walking towards something new. They walked side by side along the riverbank, their coats brushing lightly, their breaths visible in the crisp air. The willow trees swayed gently, no longer weighed down by frost. "You've been different," Elena said softly, watching the water. "Since that night." "I had to be," he replied. "Why?" He inhaled slowly. "Because losing you hurt more than anything I've gained in my entire life." She stopped walking, turned to him. Her eyes weren't angry anymore. They were searching, carefully, gently. "What do you want from all of this, Adrian?" she asked. "Really?" He looked at her, truly looked, at the woman who had changed the way he saw the world, at the woman who had taught him what even billions couldn't buy. "I want nothing," he whispered, "except the chance to deserve being in your life." Her breath trembled. "You don't want the land anymore," she murmured. "No," he said firmly. "I want you to keep it. To protect it. To fill it with whatever memories you choose." Her eyes glistened. "And us?" she asked softly, the word fragile on her lips. His voice cracked. "I want to earn your forgiveness, and maybe, someday, if I'm lucky, I want to earn your heart." A tear slipped down her cheek. She wiped it quickly, but he had already seen. "Adrian," she whispered, voice trembling with something new, something alive. "You broke me." "I know," he said softly, "and I'll spend as long as it takes to rebuild what I shattered." She inhaled slowly, deeply, as if gathering all the pieces of her courage. "I've been angry," she admitted, "and afraid, and hurt. But you stayed, not to win, Not to push, just stayed. He nodded. Because you matter. She looked at him, truly looked. Then she stepped closer. Not into an embrace, not into a confession, just closer. I don't know if I'm ready, she said honestly, but I'm not scared of trying anymore. He swallowed hard, emotions swelling in his chest. Trying is enough, he whispered. She reached out slowly, letting her fingers brush his hand, just barely, just softly, like testing the warmth of something fragile. He didn't grab her hand. He didn't pull her toward him. He simply let her touch exist. Her fingers lingered against his for a few tender seconds. Then she intertwined them with his, carefully but willingly. A quiet breath escaped both of them. Snowflakes drifted from the sky again, gentle this time, like blessings, not storms. How a story ends without ending. They walked back to town hand in hand, slow and steady, as if learning a new rhythm together. The willow branches swayed overhead, whispering memories into the wind. The river room welcomed them with warm light and the smell of cinnamon and books. Inside, the town watched quietly, not with surprise, but with the warm knowing that comes only from people who understand that love is a long, slow, patient thing. Elena poured 2 cups of coffee. Adrian prepared the tables beside her. Their movements fell naturally into place. Separate lives, finally moving in the same direction. Not rushed, not forced, not perfect, but real, deep, hopeful, human. Love doesn't always happen loudly. Sometimes it begins with a cup of coffee. Sometimes it grows in the quiet spaces between words. Sometimes it survives storms we don't think we can endure. And sometimes the greatest love stories are written not by grand gestures, but by kindness. A kindness that stays. A kindness that learns. A kindness that heals. Adrian Hale arrived in Willow Ridge as a billionaire. Cold, distant, powerful. He stayed as a man, willing to break, willing to rebuild, willing to learn what love truly meant. And Elena? She learned that even the deepest hurt can find its way back to hope, if the heart is given time to breathe again. This wasn't the end of their story, just the beginning of a new chapter, one written slowly, one written honestly, one written together. Because when kindness speaks louder than money, love finally has space to answer.